Reminds me of fucking Death Note, where it's like, do we
If
need...
the police don't do it, we take it into our
do
own
we need to be
hands.
vigilantes? Like, these criminals? Like, does someone else need to be doing this work? Hi everyone! We're back with another week of Josei Junkies. We're a podcast where we talk about anime and more from the female perspective. I'm Iso.
And I'm Kane.
And today we kind of wanted to get into talking about crime. Because today I was watching this new documentary on Netflix. Or, I don't know if it's a documentary. It's more like a show. Talking about this one serial killer named Jeffrey Dahmer. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't heard about it. But then again, I don't watch enough true crime. But what is it about?
It's about this dude who was a serial killer back in the like 1980 mid 1980s to like early 90s, I want to say it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he like killed around like 15, 17 something, like pretty much POC boys. And he was homosexual, and like I think that's how he got like a lot of the guys. He like invited them over to his like place and he would kill them there. But it was like in Wisconsin and Ohio these killings happened. But it was so wild because I'm always just like, why do they follow this guy back home? Like, why? I don't understand. Like, I look at their pictures and I'm like, is this guy considered traffic? Like, it's like Ted Bundy, where like he seemed like a nice guy, and I'm like, except this guy was so eerily like, I wouldn't even consider it nice. He just made me feel weird. He was so, I don't want to say awkward, but like something was off. I think
maybe it's not just based on looks?
I mean, I guess it wasn't, because a lot of them he'd be like, oh, I'll pay you to like take photos. Like, oh, let's take photos. I'll pay you. And he had one guy who seemed like he kind of liked him like in a relationship way, but he still ended up killing that guy too. And it was so sad because that guy was deaf. No, deaf? Mute? I think mute and deaf. I don't think they ever showed him talking, but he signed.
I think it's also sad because I think in society too, I think women usually are the ones who are like the victims usually, right? In most cases of these crimes. So I think maybe men don't have this kind of like, I don't know if you have it, like this paranoia or like constant anxiety. So then like they are a lot more trusting. I know like whenever I see there are people on the street and either they're like just around, they look like they need help, I always want to jump in and help and like reach out my hand or like, hey, do you need a ride, do you need this? But I always worry for my safety, so I would never do that. But I know that if I was a dude, I would totally take that chance, because I'm like, usually for the most part nothing bad usually happens to me, you know?
Yeah.
But so maybe they were in that mindset where they thought they were safe, so it's so sad to
Okay,
think
maybe
about.
that's true. I feel like he picked up a lot of guys from like gay clubs, although some of them were kids. Like one of the dudes was underage. No, it was so fucked up because it was actually, he had, I think, invited one, I think this kid was underage too, over, and then he would drug them. And this kid managed to get out of the house like before he got killed. But he was like super fucked up that when he got home, like he was about to die. They had to call the ambulance, and it was lucky his family called them in time. He made it through. But it was like a really poor like Laotian family. Is it Laotian, right? Laos?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Laos.
So, but then later on, he picks up the dude's brother, who's also underage, like 14. And the kid knew it was him. Like they knew he had gone to court for the other kid. They're like, oh, you sexually molested like a minor. But he knew the dude like did that to his brother. But he's like, the only reason I went with you is because like you said you pay me money for like pictures and my family really needs it. And I was like, bruh, this kid almost killed your brother and you're like gonna go with him knowing you're like underage, and like how fucked up is that? Like,
it's because they prey on the weak and the people who are really at the bottom and struggling. You know, they're willing to do anything to make ends meet. And so it's like, those are the kind of worst people to even get, like people in general. But jeez.
No, that was like a whole theme throughout like the story too, where they're talking about like, oh, he moved to like a very poor area. I mean, the thing is like the guy didn't make a lot of money, but he was also still white, living in an area where it's like all POC, like, and they like bring up like, oh, you intentionally preyed on like all these like black and brown people, like you knew they had no other choice. And the thing is, at least the way they portrayed it in this, I'm not sure because I haven't looked more into it, but
Mhm.
they made it seem like he really wasn't aware of his own privilege in that, like that he like saw it as like, no, it wasn't because I was white and they were like brown or anything like that. I approached anyone who looked pretty to me, who I found really like
Oh,
beautiful. And like the way
that's
they portrayed it in the series really made it seem like, yeah, that was like he, like with all the fucked up shit that he did, he still, I want to say, was honest when he did get caught, you know? Like as soon as he got caught, he's like, I might as well just say everything. Like, I'll reveal where I like buried all of them and what happened. He didn't like really leave any details out. He's like, yeah, and I guess it is what it is. And he's like, I'm not gonna plead insanity. I wasn't insane. I was lucid. It's just like,
it's one of those things though, but I think like a lot of these criminals who are like criminals, they want to be known. They want the notoriety of like their crime and like how well they've done and like how tricky they were, how they were able to get away with it for so long. It's like this whole thing, and like us, I guess, the public giving them that kind of like space and like, the attention, that's what they live off on. They want to just be known like down in history, like this is what I did.
normally I would think that, but this particular case I think was different because there was no publicity. That was like another aspect of it. They're like, oh, he like killed all these people over all this time. Like, why was it never publicized? And obviously the answer was because they were POC, right? Like, that doesn't make
Mhm.
the news because if they're not white, right?
Mhm.
Or at least
So sad.
that's the lens they were showing the series through. They definitely had very much a, I don't want to say a bias, but like they were very much trying to push the like, make sure you see that like the victims were like people of color, and like how people of color are like more at risk for this kind of thing happening, I guess.
Mhm.
So
It's always like the silent people who are like the most vulnerable in our society
yes.
that tend to be the victims, and then obviously none of these crimes get like noted, and so that's why like we have to be like way more vigilant
Oh, vigilant.
vigilant
Vigilant.
vigilant. Okay, so we have to be way more
Villagers? Are we Animal Crossing?
we have to be way more villagers. Why do you do that so well?
Do I do it? Thank you.
I think it sounds pretty good.
I'm trying to attract some villagers, all right?
Anyways, yeah, so we got to watch out for each other. We really got to pay attention because those are the people at most at risk in our communities.
Oh my god, it's so true. Okay, MVP of this whole series though was his neighbor. This neighbor named what's her name? Glenda, I want to say it was. She had like a daughter or two daughters, at least one daughter, and she was like a black woman who was his neighbor. At least I'm going off what they portrayed in the series. I'm not sure if it was the exact same for real life, but she could literally smell the stench from like the rotting. Yeah, through her vent, because she was right next door, and it was like a poor house. It's not like great, right? It's an apartment complex.
Mhm.
And she would hear the screams. Like, she's like, oh, I heard like someone scream like, no, and then like they were out, right? They stopped screaming because he kills them. And she would hear like the what's it called, power tools like going and stuff, but she never knew what was happening. And like remember the one who was like a kid who got the brother who got drugged, the second one who already knew his other brother made it out, the one who didn't make it out, he actually got out of the apartment like while he was drugged. And then she found him outside, like just in his underwear, I guess, or like naked or whatever, with her daughter. And they called the cops, and the cops came, and they were like, "Oh, like what's happening here?" Because he had like a knock on his head, he was bleeding. And then he only was able to get out because the guy left to go do something, and he was coming back, and then he saw it, and he lied to police officers and said like, "Oh, it's my boyfriend." And then they asked him how old he was, and he said he was 19, even though he was 14. And the officers never double checked the age, and the woman was very adamant about like, are you sure, like, can you check, like, are you sure? And she kept saying, yeah, it's my boyfriend, he's 19, he's just really drunk, he gets like this, all this.
Dude, that's so suspicious.
Yeah.
What the heck?
And
nobody even questioned it?
Yeah, they didn't question it, and he ended up going back. Like the police officers brought him back to that apartment and like left him there, like, okay, just handle your shit. And that guy ended up dying, the kid ended up dying. But then even throughout the whole time, I think there was like 5 murders that happened where the neighbor lady kept calling the cops and kept saying like, something is wrong, like I heard like he's killing people, can you come? And they just kind of brushed her off and like, if you keep calling 911, we're not going to know when it's a real emergency, and like we'll send someone out, but they never sent anyone out, and like 5 more people died because like she'd hear it and she was suspicious of all these things, other things that were going on, and like for specific people, like they meet him and then they disappear the next day, and cops didn't do anything about it.
This is when being a nosy neighbor is important.
No,
And like it's
truly.
best to just be like in your business. It's kind of suspicious. Let me like check up what's wrong. Why is it that you think like we I think you for sure. And for me as well, but like again, I think it makes me too paranoid. Like are into these crime shows.
I
Like
think
what is it about them?
for me, it's like wanting to be prepared if it ever happens to me. Like, it's so I'm aware of how people act,
Mhm.
so I can be more acutely attuned where I'll notice things and then not get into these situations.
Yeah, that probably is the case because I just saw this like video where they were talking about how true crime cases are way more likely. I mean, like women are way more into like true crime than like any other demographic, and it's probably just because in reality that is how they are more likely to be the victims. And then society has like taught us growing up like, in like our situations, rape situations, a lot of women are usually like, oh, like victim blaming and like, ask like what were you wearing, so it's like we feel like I guess responsible for our own safety. So it's like having these is like a manual, like, okay, watch out for this, watch out for that.
No,
I just know
definitely.
it makes me so paranoid because like it's the same thing with Final Destination. It just makes me so paranoid. Like every little thing I could see, like, oh, how it could like transpire. Today is not a good speaking day. Transpire,
Transpire.
yeah, into something really terrible. And I just don't like being that state of mind all the time. It's like constant anxiety and stress.
And that's what it's like to be female, like in this day and age. As much as we wish it wasn't true, like I feel like men really don't ever have to worry about this, and because they don't have to worry about it, they don't know it exists, like out of sight, out of mind.
I wish there was more like awareness about why this was a thing as well, why people are interested in true crime and everything. Because I feel like in this case, especially, like it could happen to men too. And I think that's another aspect that we don't ever speak about in our society
Mm.
of like men also being victims to rape and like assault and death and all of this stuff. And they have the highest suicide rates out of all the other demographics in America. But it's just not talked about, so it's like they're not able to like properly prepare themselves and like
Yeah,
get themselves out of these
I
situations.
mean, I feel like for men, a big part of the reason these demographics end up being so high is because men are also taught to like rein in their emotions and not show them and not talk about things. So when
Yeah,
stuff does happen, it all happens at once. Like suicide rates, like they're taught like don't show your emotions, don't be a quote unquote like don't be a pussy, don't like crying isn't for men, right? And
yeah,
that's simply not true. Like we're all humans, we all experience the same emotions. Yeah, we might have different like body parts and we might have like a different amount of hormones, but in the end we're still humans and we still
hmm,
experience the same things. So you can't just expect someone to shut part of it off just because someone has a dick and someone has a vagina. Like, come on.
yeah. And I hope people watch these, at least the documentary that you watch, and take that leaving the documentary rather than just taking it as pure entertainment.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this could also happen. Obviously it happens to like these really underrepresented population and like really at risk population and
Mm.
also men. So I think that would be good takeaway. I feel like so weird. Um, but if there was a way, honestly, and then another thing I wanted to point out is like if a person is like suspicious, like and they're like, have like previous what is it, like crime under them, they should be investigated.
Yes.
Like if they've committed a crime before, the chances of them committing a crime again is very likely.
And I mean, a big issue with this too was them just like not checking. This dude had like was on probation for that first kid, and they still didn't like check him for the other things. They just let him go with the other
Yeah,
kid.
and obviously there's a bias, right? Oh, it's like, oh, he couldn't do any wrong. He looked like a nice guy.
Yeah,
And then
definitely.
all humans have biases, so that I don't think the system is there to check them for their
Like,
biases.
where is the better safe than sorry? It doesn't hurt to check, especially if that's your job. Please just check.
Yeah.
Man.
lives could have been saved for that. I'm happy for the lady. Like, she definitely saved a lot more victims
Yeah. I'm
by, like, trusting her gut and instinct.
I was looking it up later too, and apparently she stayed in the same apartment like up until like 2000, like late 2010-ish or something later. Like,
I
she
hope she
stayed
got
there.
some therapy too.
Yeah, but I'm surprised.
Jeez.
Like if that stuff was happening next door to me and I lived through that and heard all that and had all this trauma, like, why would you stay in the same apartment? I can't imagine how she was able to do that. Maybe because of price and she
She's
had no other
poor.
choice, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it could be that.
That's
Like,
even
not everyone has
worse.
the privilege to be able to move away from their trauma?
Yeah. But that's so wild to me. Like, I can't imagine just remembering that, and especially when she feels the guilt that she did. Like, I could have saved those people, and like they didn't listen to me. That kind of thing. That would haunt me every night.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Have
So
you ever
sad to
like
think about.
taken any self-defense classes?
I've taken a few, but honestly, I don't think they're enough
Yeah.
to kind of like put you when you're put in a situation like that. I
Mm,
think it's just like your reaction, unless you're actively training. I don't think
that's
I don't know
true.
how much self-defense classes could actually help, because I've taken karate, I've taken self-defense, I've taken judo, but when in action, it's like, you don't just follow. Your body doesn't naturally react unless you've been training and
Yeah.
actively
I feel
training.
like it has to be muscle memory. Otherwise, you're in too much
Yeah.
shock and like you don't know what you're doing. You just kind of move. And if your muscles don't
Another
remember, then you
thing
aren't doing anything.
another thing is, like, I feel like I always doubt my intuition too.
Same.
Like, I always just be like, okay, but am I overreacting? Maybe they're just walking really close to me, and like following me for like how many like hours? Like, because when I was living in Japan, I feel like it's so strange how so many people don't. When I talk to my Japanese friends, they don't really have this experience, or they don't really know many people who have like problems with stalking, like chikan, where like train harassment and like these creepy events. Either that, or they're just not openly talking about it. And these events are happening, but no, it's not an open
I
conversation.
feel like it's not
Because when
an
I
open
told them,
conversation.
I think so too, because I've talked a lot with my foreigner friends, and they've all had like one or two incident of something strange happening to them that's just out of the ordinary. But
I,
I remember, like, this one guy followed me home from, like, 2 different train station, and it's, like, and the other one is, like, a smaller train station where, like, not many people take it because it goes very into, like, the houses area and, like, very rural. And, like, for the entire time, once I noticed him, like, halfway through, I still doubt it. I'm like, we're probably going in the same direction. It's no big deal." And, like, even though the train cars were all empty, he decided to stay in the same train car as me. And, like, I was still like, "No, I'm probably crazy."
red
But then,
flags.
like, even when he, like, stood right in front of the railings where I was sitting, even though there were, like, empty seats everywhere and he just had to stand right in front of my, like, seat,
Hmm.
I was still like, "Oh, it's no big deal. He's probably just, you know,
It's us
like,
trying to
making up
pretend like
some."
nothing's wrong because we don't want to be the overreactive female. Like, why are you always screaming
Yeah.
about everything? Like, not everything's about you. Not everything's a danger.
Yeah.
But everything really is a danger.
And even when he, like, took his hand and shoved it in his pants, I was like, "Maybe he's just adjusting."
No.
Maybe,
No.
like,
Dude, I
maybe,
feel you though.
like, it's itchy, you're changing, you're like, you got a wedgie or something, like, I was just like, "It's no big deal." I was like, "It's probably not that big of a deal." And then I look up and he's, like, heavy breathing, looking at my chest while, like, stroking his pants. And I was like, "Okay." At that point, I was like, "Alright, this guy's a freaking weirdo.
No,
I need to do something."
I remember I literally saw a photo where, and I almost want to say more power to them, where like the girl sees it happen. Like, I saw one on Twitter for sure where she saw it happening in front of her. It was just like her and the guy, I think, on the train because it looked pretty empty. And he was
Mhm.
straight up had his dick out, and she took a picture of it while he was just doing it, and she posted it on Twitter, and she's like, "Yep, this is Japan." And I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like, I didn't even
Dude, that's
notice it,
ballsy.
dude. It took me like a good like 30 seconds before I actually noticed what was happening in the picture because it was so like unexpected to find, like, in a picture on Twitter.
Mhm.
Like, I was like, is this just a dude on the train? And I was like looking at it, and then I realized after I read her like caption, I was like, Oh my god.
So so gross. Why is this a thing? I just don't understand.
And it's not to say
Anyway,
like Japan is like one of the safest places too. So that's what's wild about it. If Japan is like one of the safest places, think about the rest of the world where this is like not even like uncommon at all.
I feel like although Japan is safe, it's also part of the culture where like, you don't really speak out, so it's easier for the criminals and like these problematic people to get away with doing these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's
So
also
I
very
feel like it happens
misogynistic.
more often. Yeah, and then also I think it's like the repressed culture as well leads to these kind of incidents and like this whole strange thing. And I remember like that's why the word otaku or people who like anime have such bad rep in Japan is because like they tend to be tied with like hentai, they tend to be tied with like the porn addiction and all of these things, and then they have to find like releases, and that's not the best way to kind of like get your interaction of like, oh, seeing like the opposite gender as just like, I don't know, a flesh tool
Yeah, I
that you can use.
I think
And
there's
so
like
it's like a very unhealthy image
there's a
promoted.
huge lack of like interaction between the genders or whatever genders you
Hmm.
want to be, I guess. All genders in Japan. Like I feel like guys don't really talk to girls and girls don't really talk to guys on like a normal level, and it leads to this really awkward exchange when they do talk. And on top of like the misogyny where there's like the power dynamic between guys and girls, which I think is improving with the generations. Like I've noticed younger generations, you see more like equality and like guys recognizing more of what's going on and being like, I don't think that's right, which is really good. Please continue to do that. Stand up for the people who can't stand up for themselves. But you see like this really awkward interaction of like guys not knowing how to act around girls, and then it gets really uncomfortable because they do these things that are like whipping your dick out on a train, or like what's socially
So
acceptable.
creepy.
Yeah, because they don't know, like they don't interact with people. Like it's not even just, I guess it's not even just interacting with other genders, it's interacting with people in general, like the whole hikikomori
Hmm.
lifestyle and neat lifestyle where people are so isolated. And it's like a plus and a minus, in Japan, where it's so easy to live alone and like isolate yourself, but you can also live on your own easily, get your food and everything delivered, or like konbinis are super convenient. Well, that was totally not what convenience store is convenient. Um, but it's like a double-edged sword, because while it's so easy to be on your own and have to deal with people, the fact that you don't have to deal with people also makes you like inept when it does come to when you have to be around people. You don't know how to act, you don't know how to talk around people, how to like not be creepy around people.
Yeah.
And
And I also noticed too, elementary school students in Japan are also more likely to like interact, like intermingle, like boys can play with girls and stuff. It's not until like middle school, high school that they start to split off and they only hang out exclusively with boys or girls, and they have their own little friend groups and they don't really like mingle with each other. I remember when I was teaching like middle schoolers in Japan, I was like, so interesting to see the dynamic, how the class is completely like split, and we were trying to like form people into groups. Like the girls would always, even in a group of like five, the guys would group together, girls would group together, they still don't like mingle that much, or like they're really awkward about it. And I feel like it's not until college that that kind of like, the gokon,
mm,
and like all of the group dates and stuff, that it becomes, that's when they kind of like interact more. So the only time they interact with someone is probably their significant other, or like a family member or something like that.
why do you think it happens in like middle school, or do you think it's exclusive to Japan, because that is like puberty age, so I could see it happening because of that.
I think so. It could be that it's all over. I just noticed that distinction especially, and I thought it was like really interesting.
Yeah, I I'm never sure when I see it. Like Japan has been like, I feel they've curated a very perfect image for themselves to the rest of the world. And let me tell you, Japan is amazing to visit, and it has so many great things to go and do and experience, like many other countries as well. But also, like many other countries, it has its own negatives as well. And like we're just talking about these as one of them that we feel aren't really talked about, because a lot of them have to do with like being a female in Japan and the kinds of things you experience, like a lot of the misogyny that is super apparent, or things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Like big thing is like a lot of the cheating that goes on in Japan, where it's actually on both ends for men and women is very, very common. Like,
Yeah.
and it has a lot to do with like, I guess what they call like the tatemae and the honne, where it's like honne is like how you really are as a person, and like how you really are as a person, whereas tatemae is like the front you show to everyone else. And since how you are as a person, like how you represent yourself in like, I forget the word, but like it's very important to present yourself in a very like good way. Like you want to show your best side to everyone, right? Even if that isn't how you actually are, but that leads to a lot of like insincerity. And it's like the opposite of like America, where it's like we value like honesty and individuality a lot more, you know?
Yeah.
Not to say that both don't exist, but yeah. True crime though, that has been wild. Like that was just the one I watched on Netflix, but there's been like others. There was like the worst roommate one. They had like a grandma killer. That one was so wild.
Oh my gosh.
This grandma literally was like poisoning people. Like she would have people stay at her place, kind of like a boarding house in a way. And a lot of them tended to be like older or like had disabilities, so they were getting like social security checks. And she would like poison them, or some of them, I don't think it was all, but like poison them, kill them, and then bury them in her backyard. And then collect their social security checks. And she was literally a grandma, so no one suspected her, because she's just like this old, sweet old lady looking, you know? That one was wild. And then the other one, what was it? Don't Mess with Cats?
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
That title got me.
Cats.
Dude, I thought it was gonna be like a wholesome, like, don't fuck with cats, because, you know, cats are little shits and they just, like, will fuck with you kind of thing.
No,
but
it's
no.
so messed up. It's so messed up. And I like some of the atrocity that like happened in that, where like he just basically, so essentially he just there's this crazy online killer who like goes around and like picks up cats or kittens, and he kills them in really terrible ways. Like I think one of the ways was it when he put it in one of those like vacuum seal bags and then started to just suck the air out of it, and it's just so gruesome. Like I would never want to watch that. Like it's just so sick.
Yeah, and he was like posting it on like the black net and stuff. It was
Yeah.
But then,
and so he started to kill, and then like wanted, like was really excited. People were chasing him, trying to find his identity and trying to find clues and pick little things off the videos that he posted out.
yeah,
you know?
I think they were like,
and then he started
what's the
targeting
bedding?
humans afterwards.
Or like, what outlet is this? They were like zooming in on this really pixelated, low quality video, like, oh, this outlet, like, where is it from? Like, what countries have it? Or like, this bedding, where can you get it? Kind of like details they were looking for.
So it's crazy that the internet got together and kind of like try to find little clues about this person. And they even try to warn the authorities, like, hey, he's going to try to kill humans next. You know, those were the clues that he was giving us. And then no one took them seriously until something actually happened.
What
and
is
I think that's
with
the
it?
problem.
Like, I don't understand it. Like, when you report to authorities, like, these super red flags, like, every, like, serial killer, murderers, whatever, you always hear, like, this happened before. And they do get reported. And, like, why is this never, like, why? I don't understand. Like, do they not run checks? Like, what is going on here?
I always think that maybe it just don't have enough staff to handle all of the, like, you know, requests or like hints that people are giving them. So they really have to pick and choose which one they think is like really like dire and like really got to be investigated on. But I do think it is a failure on the system to not investigate until things actually happen. You know, like, oh, we have solid evidence. But I think also maybe they can't warrant checks as often unless they have some evidence.
That's true. Like, they can't do like search warrants without like proper evidence for a lot of like probable cause, at least in America. But I still wonder, like, is there not something they could do, some kind of help, like some kind of flag? Like, can't they like flag the account and be like, keep this on like a hot watch, you know, check in on something, especially if they've had like previous records? I don't know. I feel like there's something more we can do. Like, they feel so avoidable.
And like in terms of anime, like I feel like the anime like Erased
Mm.
was like very like, oh, you know, I feel like I watched it, I was like, oh my god, this criminal needs to get caught. He's a freaking weirdo. And like the stuff that he was doing really reminded me of like that those cases really happen in Japan.
Mm.
You know, like, you know, people preying on children, and because Japan is so safe, a lot of the children walk to school by themselves or they walk with friends. And like there's a lot of if you read into it, there's a lot of stories of neglect too, like the story of like the children found in like a home because nobody ever checks on them, and they kind of like no none of the relatives knew about them, and then they just starved in their house because
Oh,
their parents like
those
ran
are like
away
the
or
sad
something.
ones. I think
Yeah.
I watched that documentary of like Japan where they just have like these retirement homes, for lack of a better, or not even retirement homes. They're like apartments for old people, and they just like
Mm.
live there, and they don't have family, or they have family who doesn't check in on them, and they just like die there. Like I remember when I watched, and the lady was literally like telling her neighbor from like across the way, if you don't see my window like curtains open, can you please call to let them know that I'm dead, because that's why I didn't open the window curtain. So my body, because the bodies will literally just die there and start rotting, and people don't notice until like someone starts smelling it. And like, how fucked up is that?
And usually when you and if it's like covered, right, the bills are all paid for, then no one would ever check up, because at least I remember when I lived there, it was like they would go to your door
Mm.
every month, or they would bill you home, and if you don't eventually get like the bills, then they'll just go to your door and be like, excuse me, you need to pay these,
Mm.
like your electricity or whatever bills.
Mm. Man.
So I wonder if that's the case. It's just like if they already set up like automatic deposit online or something, so they don't have to worry, then no one will ever check up on them.
I'm not sure, but I also feel like maybe government pays for it or something like that, because I don't know how it works
Hmm.
in Japan for that. Or maybe their family is paying and they just don't check in on them at all if they do have family. I'm not exactly sure. Because I remember when I watched it too, like their places were trash. Like they literally lived in pigsties, and like it was just really, really sad. It didn't seem like they had anyone. So I feel like it might be government money, or even if they were paying every month, maybe it's a they didn't pay a month, and they after that month they finally get checked on. But like imagine being like dead for a whole month. Your body's been rotting for a whole month.
That's so sad. And I know Japan's like big on like the death rituals and everything.
Yeah, and they have
Otherwise, their
like,
souls don't live in
I
peace.
think they have like a higher percentage of like elderly than young people now too. So it's like they have a
Yeah,
huge elderly population with like not enough to really support them.
that's so sad.
But man, it makes me wonder for like the whole thing I was going back to, like, why don't the police do anything? Like, reminds me of fucking Death Note, where it's like, do we
If the
need,
police don't do it, we take
yeah,
it into our
do
own
we need to be
hands.
vigilantes? Like, these criminals, like, does someone else need to be doing this work? Like,
It's like he's the Batman.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like Death Note was such an integral part of like anime culture. Like even today, like one thing I've
Hmm.
noticed,
It's starting to come back. It's wild.
I don't even think it's that it's coming back. I don't think it ever left, because Death Note, okay, so animes nowadays, I feel like they go for like a season, and even if they're like hyped up, people just forget about them. Like especially after like a year or so, you won't really
So
remember it.
true.
Or like especially when you look at cons and stuff, people cosplay well, like the latest cosplays, but the ones that you consistently see are like Death Note and like the older animes like Sailor Moon, because those are like the bread and
Iconic.
butter. Yeah, they're iconic, they're bread and butter, they're like timeless, you know? Like everyone remembers them despite the age, whereas like newer ones you may not see, like even like bigger ones like Kimetsu no Yaiba or like Shingeki no Kyojin. Like those are pretty big, right? Like
Yeah.
you'll see them here and there, but sometimes you'll go to a con and you won't see it at all. But I feel like every single con you'll see like one L or one Misa, you know? Everyone does them.
Lisa
Everyone.
is so popular with the new gen though. They love her look, like that gothic kind of style with the cute
I
pigtails.
heard that
Or
that's coming back. Like people are getting back into the goth style, the Nana style.
mhm,
Like I saw a
Nana
lot of
style.
I saw like I think Vivian Westwood was trending again, and I was like, wow, bringing it back.
It's just so interesting because I remember when I saw Death Note back then, it was so different from anything you see online. It was like such a original story and like such an interesting concept of like questioning morality. I feel like I never really watched anime and been like questioning things
But it's like my favorite thing
as
about
much when I was
anime.
younger.
That's the thing I
Yeah.
miss the most about like I feel like we don't see as much in anime nowadays. It's like the whole like not cookie cutter plot. Like you don't really know what's gonna happen. Like what your evil character isn't necessarily evil kind of thing. Like you
Hmm.
really have to question your morals and what you think about the anime, and it makes it such a talkable topic to people because people realistically do have very different opinions on these things. Like to this day, do you think Kira was right in his actions?
I feel like it's hard to say. Like I have mixed feels about it, and I think that's normal for most people,
Yeah.
right? It's like what he did was basically just kill people who are like criminals or could be criminals, try to cleanse. But I think where it went off was when he wanted to kind of declare himself God.
Mm.
And like, you know, when he started to have his cult following and all of this stuff, that was when it like all went downhill. But up to that point, I think he started good, and I think the way that they built his character was very realistic. Like I think everyone has good intentions,
Mm.
but depending on how they take actions and like other outside influences, their ego, their pride gets in the way, and that could kind of shift their like original intent, good intent, into something that's a little bit more twisted,
Do you feel
right? Because
like Kira's like own mentality ever changed? Like like you know how he's like declared himself God, but how do you feel about like I guess his descent into that? Do you feel like his values ever really changed, or maybe he was feeling that way the whole time? It just hadn't presented itself until he realized he could take that like stance.
I think it's probably the later because
The
it
latter.
as he grew stronger and the more he got away with it, right? The more he was like,
Mm.
living off this like chase from the police. And then it was just like it just went off from there. And I think it tied back to what we were talking about,
Mm.
where it's he was graying the area of like criminal like ego, you know, of wanting to be like known, of wanting to have his action recognized. If he had taken a more like like not calm but like very underground, like if he had taken a more chill, I guess I could say, approach to it and
Didn't
like
just
had
kill everyone off,
killed
literally
criminals
writing their
off.
name off.
Yeah, but I think he was already really smart and doing it like really randomly and stuff. It's just that he had L, who was also a genius and be able to pick out like his actions and be able to target it from like some
Mm.
crazy, you know, thought process in his mind, like come draw those conclusions.
It makes
But
me
I feel like if he didn't have such a strong opponent, he would have gone away with it for much longer.
it makes me almost wonder if like L was like what's the word, like was adding oil to the fire, you know? Was he
Uh-huh.
like if L didn't exist, would Kira have gotten as far as he did, or would he have kind of stayed, you know, killing just like the criminals? He wouldn't have gone on like the whole godman route.
Yeah. I feel like it was definitely the oil. It added to him for sure. And he was just like so like thrill on the chase. And then even at the end, you know, when not at the end, but like when L wait, is it everything gonna be spoiler? We just assume everyone has seen Death
I
Note,
think we
right?
just assume spoilers for all this. Death Note has been out long enough, you know? Spoilers.
Okay, okay. Well, when L died and Death Note was like, "Hey, I want him to know. I want him, you know, it's like it's me. It was like smiling
Mm.
because he won. It was like that. So I definitely feel like there was a huge part of like Kira where he wanted like to win against L and he wanted like to be the better mind game. So he definitely lost his original purpose. It was just like
It
now
became
it's
more
just the
about him
chase.
and not about
Yeah,
the law and
the cause.
justice.
I
Okay.
feel like that started out with like everything, and I feel like a lot of businesses are kind of like similar with that mindset. Maybe
Uh.
start out good, but once other things are involved like money and like fame and all of this
Money.
stuff, people start to like, you
Money.
know, split. But it's interesting to talk because I feel like that really speaks on the human, the real human aspect of things.
I think it's like human and also the aspect of just living, you know, like when you're a kid, you have all these ideals and you think, oh, I'm going to do this and that. But then the reason like a lot of people change or become like, I hear a lot of people say, oh, you're Democratic right when you're younger, and then you become more Republican when you're older, you go more right. Because it's like, it starts to do with, like, you earn your own money, right? No one's paying for you. Generally, you know, maybe someone is, but for most people, so then you start wanting to be like, well, it's my money kind of thing. And that's where you start getting, like, a difference in thought, and your thoughts on things may change, where it's like your ideals may not line up with what reality is showing. And that's why you kind of get a mix of that.
That's true.
But on the true crime thing, man, I was like, some of these are pretty interesting, but as a girl, I think it's really interesting to watch these and, like, analyze them, and then think about the things you do in real life and how they can be used to protect yourself. Like have you ever, like, walked to your car and just held your keys in case someone came at you?
Always.
Yeah, okay,
It's be
always,
dumb
right?
not to.
Okay, did you know that you're not supposed to, like, I feel like, because I used to do this, where you'll hold it, like, between your thumb and your index finger, right? Like, in your palm. You're not supposed to do that.
Why?
Because, like, if you try to, like, you're gonna use it, like, in a stabbing motion, most likely, right?
Yeah.
Then it's gonna, like, rip right straight. Like, if that pushed, it would push back into your hand and cut you, you know? It would hurt you, and you wouldn't get it to push forward. So what you're supposed to do is, like, put the key in between your fingers, kind of like Wolverine, you know, like a claw. And then you will get a more, like, see, it'll push through and not into your hand. So, things I learned on the internet for self-defense.
I also heard that instead of doing that method, because that requires you to be really close to them before you can strike, is to start swinging your lanyard, or have a lanyard so you can start swinging it. And so from afar, you're already looking like a threat, you know? And then you can
like at an
definitely do more
animal when you want to
engagement.
look bigger and, like, scare it
Yeah,
off.
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
We are the lionesses.
You start roaring and, like, making weird animals, and
Ooh.
the biggest thing is to turn around and make eye contact with them, so you memorize their face, and then they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be, like, noticed.
No, we can't
And
say
so then
roar,
I
because
make a lot of noise.
roar is dinosaur for I love you. We're not trying to say we love
Is
them.
it? Is that a real thing?
That's an emo kid thing.
You start, like, barking at them or something.
Dude.
Or what is a scary noise?
Barking is pretty scary. No, now you just sound like a scared chihuahua, like, forever scared for no reason.
I was trying to sound like a chicken.
That was a chicken?
But
What is that?
that's a chicken. That's the relative of the dinosaur, okay? That's the as much as I'm willing to compromise.
Yo, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
No, we are not having this talk right now. Moving on.
No, there's an answer. There's an actual answer.
Okay, so I'm gonna say the chicken.
No, it's the egg.
What?
Yeah, because eggs came before chickens, like, existed from, like, other reptiles.
So eventually the egg will produce a chicken once it's mutated?
Well, I don't know
Once
about
it
that,
evolved?
but there were eggs before chickens existed, is what it's meant to say. I learned that from one of those, like, computer games you play for, like, learning when you're in grade school. Like, it wasn't Jumpstart, but it was, like, one of the ones like Jumpstart. I forget what it was called. But yeah, egg came first. Fun fact.
Oh my god, I had no idea that was a real thing.
Man, so thinking of also the whole thing we were talking about earlier, where it's like the police don't have enough resources, like, reminded me of recently I was watching CYBERPUNK EDGERUNNERS, which is recommended anime to watch. It's on Netflix.
It's the new one on Netflix, right?
Yeah, it's only 10 episodes, so pretty fast watch. I kind of wish it was longer. That's, like, I feel like my qualm with it. I feel like they could have fleshed it out a little more, but
What is it about?
So it's about this kid named David Martinez, and
Oh wow, that's interesting.
yeah, so it's like I think I'm actually gonna rewatch it in English dub. I watched it in Japanese first, but I think the English is actually better from what I've read too. I watched the first episode in English already too. But
wow, dub wins.
yeah, rarely, but in this case, seems so. It's about, like, his life in this kind of, like, slums lifestyle where he lives a really poor lifestyle and everyone's having a hard time, and then eventually his mother's trying to get him like to not live that lifestyle. Like she wants to put him through like a really high like kind of private school and make him succeed, you know, like the immigrant dream kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But she ends up passing away, unfortunately, out of nowhere, kind of. And then he's kind of forced to deal with like being in all this debt and like not having a great lifestyle. And he's like, how can I get like money and survive and like take care of everything he needs to take care of? And it's like all the stuff he has to go through, and like, you know, it touches on like drug use, and like I feel like what it has a lot of parallels to now, in like how in like a capitalist society the poor kind of just get poorer and the rich get richer, and there's no like looking down to help the poor. They're just stuck in their situation, and they actually make it worse. I would say they exacerbate this I can't speak either.
Exasperate
The situation. So I think it was very, very interesting. I felt I could relate a lot, especially the whole, like, you know, just the working class getting kind of the shit end of the stick, no matter what they do, and no matter how they try to survive, and they keep trying to survive, and they literally sacrifice themselves to make it through, or to have someone they know make it through, you know. And it's like they even if they don't come out with anything in the end, it's just kind of good series to draw parallels to. I don't want to spoil too much.
Okay, yeah. I'll watch it and then we can discuss it. But I guess that will be this week's recommendation.
Yeah.
If you want to go check it out, we'll probably discuss it next week. And I hope this episode wasn't too like sad or upsetting for you guys, but I do think these topics are really interesting and really like not heavily discussed.
We just want to open the gates to the conversation, because we want to hear like all points of view. Like right now it's just us two talking, but we really like taking into account other points of view.
Yeah, so if you have any like comments or any like perspective regarding this, we'd love to hear it. I think it's important for us to have these open dialogues, again, to like raise awareness, and then also to make sure that, you know, there are outlets for people to speak about these things, because it shouldn't be so hush hush. I think because it's so hush hush, like a lot of these issues can continue to happen, because we can learn a lot from each other. Yeah. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's episode. We'll continue again next week. What more
with something we're not sure yet. Or
last week, what was it we talked about? It was like why we love these like distressed characters, and now this week is like true crime. That's what it seems like.
We don't have a type.
Characters.
We don't have a type.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening in to this week's podcast. We'll see you guys next week. I'm Kane.
And I'm Iso.
Bye. We'll see you again.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.